Hi, thank you for joining us today. It's Angie Rice with Boutique Travel Advisors, and I'm here joined with my business partner, Janet, and our team member, Melitza. I'm checking in from the Chicagoland area. Melitza's in sunny San Diego, and Janet is in our home base back in Phoenix, Arizona. Janet just came back from an amazing trip to Alaska. She escorted a group on a backroads trip. Originally, this was supposed to be an itinerary to Norway and to Iceland, but as a result of cancellations and needing to rebook, they looked elsewhere. Alaska is an amazing place to visit, particularly in the summer months, and more popular than ever. It's been a itinerary that many of our clients have said, tell me more about Alaska. Many of them have booked for this summer, and we also have cruisers and land travelers booked for summer 2023. And Janet's also going to share with us the dynamics of traveling with a group and the benefits of working with a tour operator like Backroads to plan your trip. And we're there to help with the details and to customize the trip so that it can be exactly what you need for your group. And that means if you're a real active group and you want longer hikes and more activities, we can incorporate that into your itinerary. If you have a more diverse group, you're traveling with travelers at different activity levels, we can work to create different activities at different levels where at the start of the day and the end of the day, what happens in between can be a little bit different. So customizing your trip really adds an elevated experience for you. Welcome, Janet. Welcome, Melitza. So, Janet, we're going to put you on the spot, and Melitza and I are going to ask you some questions to really learn so we can share with everyone else and learn together the benefits of traveling to Alaska and doing so as a group and all those other details you can share with us.
Perfect. Thanks for putting me on the spot. I'm sporting my Backroads shirt today. This is the bike shirt that you get if you're doing the Backroads trips. They're phenomenal. And like Angie mentioned, the trip was long overdue. It was originally scheduled for 2020 to Norway and Iceland. And of course, the pandemic hit and all of us had to cancel our trips. And so originally we rescheduled this trip for 2021, again to Norway and Iceland, but because Europe hadn't fully reopened yet, we kind of had to pivot. And the best thing about this trip is that it was with a private group. And I cannot recommend doing a trip with a private group highly enough. Because from day one, even though everyone in our group came in kind of from different places and everybody didn't know everybody else, but everyone in the group had somebody that they already knew. And so when we all came together, and the group was very kind of crafted and tailored to make sure that everyone's personalities and travel styles and interest was going to align. And when we came together, it was just this like perfect fit. And for those of you that have traveled in groups, I think it's safe to say that if you have a great group, you can have an incredible trip. And if you have a group that doesn't really mesh, or you have people that are not really on the same page, don't have similar travel styles, it can cause some disturbances and it can make your travel not as enjoyable. So having this private group experience was really just absolutely amazing for us, and we loved every moment.
And really, Janet, to help people understand, when you put together a group, there's two ways to really look at group travel. You can book a tour where you are part of a group, but you are booked with other people that you don't know until maybe day of arrival. And even if you are to book a non-private group, oftentimes when we have travelers who look to book a non-private group, we will ask the tour operator to get a better understanding of who's part of that group. I mean, they can't give us details, but we'll say, hey, we have a family interested in a group. Are there other families on that group? And that really helps us to some degree try to better pair. But when you're booking a private group, let's really talk about, Janet, how you put together this private group.
Sure. So like Angie just mentioned, if you have, there's two different ways to do group travel. You can do group travel where you just join an existing group, or you can do group travel where you put your own group together. Obviously, to do group travel privately, the way we did it, you have to have a group of people that are all willing to do the same trip at the same time and travel together. For us, this was a kind of a repeat. Angie and I took a part of this group to Peru, and we trekked the Inca Trail a few years ago. And that was just one of the best experiences of all of our lives. And many of the people on that group said, we want to rejoin, we want to do another trip. And so when it came time to kind of thinking about putting this group together for a new itinerary, we reached out to all the people that had done Peru with us and asked who wanted to go. Most of the people from the Peru trip ended up joining this trip. And then we asked, if you have any friends who you think would be a great fit for this group, you know how we travel, you know the types of personalities you have. We had a lot of physicians on this journey with us. If you know people that want like adventure, that are easygoing, that are fun, that are interested in seeing originally Norway and Iceland, let's talk about whether they'd be a good fit for this group. And so even though Angie and I are completely open and can travel anywhere with anyone anytime, we know that not everybody is like that. And so we're pretty careful when we put our groups together to make sure that the dynamics are really going to work. And there is a little bit of you're taking a little bit of a risk because you don't know every single person that's going to be joining, but you're essentially trusting that the people that are recommending other people for the group understand that the people they're going to recommend are people that are going to have a good time on this trip and are going to mesh well together. And it worked, incredibly, incredibly well. And we had people from Arizona, we had people from the East Coast, and everyone got along. People made new friends, existing relationships were strengthened. And it was just such a phenomenal way to experience this beautiful countryside of Alaska and also, have the bonding with other like-minded travelers.
Jenna, and explain, people might think that the cost to put your own group together is more than the cost associated with joining a non-private group. That is kind of a fallacy, correct?
Correct. So depending. For our trip with Backroads, there's a little secret. You really don't need that many people to create a private group. And so it actually is a phenomenal value because whereas normally when you go on a group trip like the one we did, there's around 20 people on it. If you have just 8 or 10 people, you can start putting your own private group together. Now the price goes down the more people you add on. And so your price might be a little bit higher if you only have 8 people, but you can have this private group experience with, even 10, 12, we were 13, and 12 people is a great number to take. And Backroads allows you to just have 12 people on a trip and make it completely private. And the best part is you're not giving anything up. And so we ended up paying the same price as we would have for a group trip if we had just joined in on a group of 20 for our private trip for 13. And we didn't sacrifice anything. We still had 3 trip leaders who were all amazing. We still had 2 vans. We stayed at the same properties. We had all the same amenities. We had all of our meals included. We had this incredible service, and all of that was customized just for us. And so I think actually the value is amazing if you can put your own private group together, or if you have, maybe you don't have 12 people that that want to travel, maybe you just know 3 or 4 or 5, and reaching out to your friends and saying, hey guys, this will be such a fun thing to do together. Do you know one other couple that can join or that you think would want to come on this trip? And same thing with families. Backroads does family travel where they pair families with kids of different ages together. So you can say, hey, maybe Angie and I want to go on a trip together with our families. Maybe there's 1 or 2 or 3 other families that are interested in a similar itinerary, and bam, we have a private group.
I've talked to a lot of single moms who are looking for this type of experience. And similarly to how Janet escorted this group, that was really an added element of value that this group received. In order to put the package together, Janet was able to pair couples and was entrusted in putting this group together. And, similarly, you might have, 3 or 4 or 8, if it's occupancy of 2 people wanting to travel together. Come to us because we have other people who are asking the same thing. We want to do a group. We want it to be organized. We want all of the details taken care of. We want to know what the price is per person, where it's all in. Like Janet said, this included meals. I think it included libations too, Janet. Is that correct? So you have all
they included quite a lot of drinks. We were not deprived of anything. And I learned while I was traveling with Backroads that their actual moniker is Snack Roads. And so it was pretty incredible that we ate and drank so much, even though this was an adventure trip. I joke, I'm like, it's the only adventure trip I've ever been on where I come back and I've gained 5 pounds. And it was worth every single pound because the food and the drinks were fantastic.
And what are kind of just getting to know the feel for this type of itinerary? You guys went to Alaska. You were originally planning for Norway, Iceland. How did you get this group together to reroute them to Alaska? Why was Alaska chosen?
And so really, I think all of us really had our hearts set on going to Norway and Iceland. And when the world was still not opening up and we had that huge spike in Arizona of cases in around January, it became pretty obvious that the likelihood of us being able to do this exact trip was relatively low. So rather than wait until the last minute and be disappointed again, I said, is there somewhere else that we can go that works for these dates? And we got extremely lucky that it happened to be that we were able to get a private trip to Alaska for almost the same exact dates that everyone had already taken off work and arranged childcare and all these things. And everyone said, yeah, let's do it. And in fact, we had another couple that actually was not scheduled for the original trip that ended up joining on this trip, and they had a fantastic time. And everyone was like, yes, we want to do this. We want to go because we want to go somewhere. And, canceling another trip or waiting till 2022 was just not something that anyone wanted to do. So it became a relatively easy and quick turnaround, and everyone went with the flow. And yes, it wasn't our original plan, but that's life. And I think over the last year and a half, we've all learned that things change and life is unpredictable. And so we just pivoted, and it was the best decision we could have made.
A lot of people did. They've had to cancel trips and replace them versus waiting for that trip to happen that maybe they had originally planned for. I know I had a girls' trip planned, and we've done 2 trips in between our original trip that was planned April 2020. So if you're waiting on certain trips where you're not sure if those markets are, or you're not ready to travel to those markets due to certain restrictions, look for other destinations, whether it's US or Northern America, where there are places that are more accessible, such as Alaska. I mean, Alaska is open and you're naturally outdoors. There's tours by land. There's smaller vessels that are cruising. So it is a great opportunity for you to plan a destination that maybe wasn't on your radar. So just kind of rethinking where you can travel right now. And Janet, when you put this itinerary together, it was a private experience. Did that mean you had some choices in where you traveled and the activities that you put on your itinerary?
So it depends on how you structure the trip. There are custom trips, and it depends on the supplier that you're using. We're talking today about Backroads. I love Backroads. I'm wearing their t-shirt. We had a phenomenal time. They are definitely not the only company. And so that's one of the reasons where, some people will say, well, why do I need a travel advisor if I'm just going to book this group trip? Well, because even though we love all of our suppliers, not every supplier is right for every type of traveler. And so there are clients that I would put on Backroads trips all day, every day. And then there are clients that I would probably never put on a Backroads trip. It's not their style of travel. It's not their pace of travel. It's not how they like to see the world. And so for us, when you come to us, we can say, this is the right itinerary for you. This is the right travel supplier for you. These are the types of people that you'll be traveling with if you're not doing a private group that we think you'll get along with versus, for Susie, we might put her with Backroads, and for Jimmy, we might put him with MT Sobeck, and for someone else, we might say probably you need a cruise or a completely private itinerary. So depending on how you structure it, there's different ways to do it. With Backroads, they have their private journeys that are where you just join an existing trip, which is what we did, or there are custom trips that you can put together. Obviously, when you start like making things completely customized, the price does change a little bit, but there's so much variety and so many options with their existing trips that it really was not necessary for us. The trips are tried and true. They take all of our recommendations and feedback and modify the trips every year to make them better and better. And so that is one of the benefits of going on a trip that's been tested, is that you know that pretty much every detail in this trip has been taken care of and very carefully curated.
So then, was this your first Backroads trip? I don't know.
This was my first Backroads trip. Angie and I have sent a lot of clients on Backroads trips and have received a lot of very, very positive feedback, but I really wanted to experience it. And even though it's a year delayed, we loved it so much that this group is probably going to rebook Norway for our original trip that we were supposed to do in 2020 for 2022, because we had such a great time. And again, I'm a huge fan of Backroads for people who love adventure travel, who are not necessarily looking to stay at all 5-star properties, because some destinations don't have those options available, who are pretty easy and go with the flow, because it is a go, go, go itinerary. There's some downtime, but not a huge amount of downtime. And so for people like that, Backroads is phenomenal. For other travelers who might want to just take things very easy, even Backroads now offers low-key type trips, but they also have biking adventures where you bike every day and you might bike up to 40 miles a day. They have hiking and walking trips. They have the multi-adventure trips, which is what we did. And then they have trips that are geared towards families with young children, geared towards solo travelers and friends, and then also geared towards families traveling with teenagers and older kids. So there's a lot of different ways to structure your Backroads trip. And if a Backroads itinerary is not the right itinerary for you, then we have other companies that operate similarly to Backroads and offer similar types of experiences, but where a few details might be different, where it might be a better fit for someone else.
And all of these Backroads itineraries are very personally curated. So like, let's say someone who even is doubting their ability to bike for 7 miles a day. They offer a lot of personalization and freedom to make your own choices as you go. So you're not, sacrificing your own convenience or your own comfortability. So you do have a lot of freedom to get picked up early and get taken back to the hotel if your legs are tired and you're just not feeling it for the day. So can you talk a little bit about how both the travelers go with the flow and also the suppliers are very in tune and reciprocative with their clients?
That is such a great point. I'm so glad you brought that up. It's so important when you're traveling on an adventure trip where everyone has different abilities. And so, yes, this was a sporty adventurous group. No, we're not. None of us are like triathletes where, we can go and bike 50 miles a day every day. This is a group where there was a lot of different types of abilities, but also different types of interest levels. You might have somebody that one day is like, yeah, I'm going to hike and do this entire hike, all the way up to the mountain, which is what we did on one of our days. Half of our group went all the way. The other half came back at the halfway point. And then on a different day, they might say, I'm kind of tired. I don't feel like doing it. So what Backroads does, because you have 3 trip leaders with you, you have the main trip leader, kind of the lead, and then you have support vans. So there's a support van that's available to pick you up if you're biking. For example, the day that we were biking, we were biking in Homer, and it's very hilly, and there was a big part of the bike trail that was very, very steep down. And a lot of the group was not comfortable on that down. It's so steep. They were worried about falling. It was a little bit slick. And so what they did is they just picked us up at the section where it becomes very steep, and the people that didn't want to bike down that super steep hill got a ride in the van with their bikes and then got let off as soon as the hill was done, and back on the trail they went. I mean, that is, to me, that's priceless, because yes, you're paying more to have all that support, but having that support makes the trip, it just gives you peace of mind. It makes things so much more easy to coordinate, because if we didn't have that trip leader and it was just all of us biking from one point to another point, it would be really hard if somebody struggled or if somebody fell or if somebody was not keeping up, because then you feel like people have to either hold back and not go as fast as they want to go or not go as far as they want to go. This way, everyone can kind of do their own thing. And we were a couples trip, and we had 6 different couples, and a lot of the couples split up. I mean, we didn't all stay together with our significant others. Some guys wanted to go and bike further and harder. Some girls wanted to go back to the spa and relax a little bit earlier. And so we did. We split up, we modified the groups, and then everyone got to meet back up. And so that type of flexibility is a really incredible thing to have when you're traveling, especially when you're traveling with friends who are not all at the same level and may not want to go as far as you did. And I actually fell before the trip even started. We rented bikes, and I did not have a support van. One of the other travelers and I just rented bikes and went and did kind of a 25-mile bike ride, and I fell and had to bike myself all the way back like 10 miles, with my hand scuffed up. And so on the days that I didn't feel, and I hurt my side a little bit. So on the days that I didn't feel like going all the way, if I didn't want to, I knew that I could just stop and I could call our support guys and say, okay, I'm ready to go back, or I'm done. My hand hurts, my hip hurts. I want to go in the van and, ride the rest of the way. That having that option just gives you so much peace of mind.
No, that assurance is definitely priceless.
I had the same words in mind, that peace of mind and the ability to know you're going to enjoy your trip. I mean, a lot of times we have couples where, there might be one, maybe it's one spouse who's quite a bit more active than the other spouse, but of course they want to travel together. And when you have the flexibility to create new dynamics within the group where, 3 or 4 are at a slower pace, 4 or 5 at a fast pace, some are in the middle. And not only do you have the flexibility to change routes, you also have on most given days, people are going to finish the activity sooner than some of the others. So you're not having to slow down and wait for other members of their groups. You're truly able to go at your own pace because there's 3 guides, which really allows for a starting group, a group that finishes last, and then there can be people in the middle, and you're able to truly go at your own pace. And that is just a benefit to be able to travel in a group, to be able to travel with your, spouse or travel mate in addition to the group, and to be able to kind of do something with a little bit of a solo-ness to it, in the sense that, hey, one day I might want to keep up with my husband, for example, hikes really, really fast. And I might want to keep up with them 2 of the days, but not all of the days. So then I can stroll back and be able to, interact with some of my friends who are on the trip with us who want to go slower on that day. So changing pace is also important too. You might be fast paced at one activity, maybe it's hiking, and be slower at biking. So you get to, or maybe it's that you're more fearful around edges. So you bike slower on the day where you're, closer to the edge. So there's so much flexibility when you're with the right tour guide, where you feel peace of mind, you feel like there's safety in place, and they know the itinerary so well that they're able to guide you so you can kind of do it more freely at your pace is just fantastic. Now, I have a question, Janet. As it relates to your itinerary, you're doing all these different activities, which certainly allows you to see all the scenery. But can you explain how you really explored Alaska as a destination along the way?
Yeah, that's a great question also. So Alaska, and for us, Angie and I and Melitza and our whole team, we plan travel for a living. I mean, we could plan a trip pretty much anywhere in the world and be able to put, a flow and an itinerary together. But there's a difference between putting a trip together and having a trip flow seamlessly. And that's really what having a partner like Backroads allowed us to do, because Alaska is a very big state and the distances between destinations are very, very vast. And so trying to figure out of this giant, amazing, incredible state, where to go in 6 short days and what to see and how to maximize every single minute without making it overly exhausting, without spending 12 hours a day in a car. Really, that's the part that Backroads kind of curated for us. And we started the trip in Anchorage because that's, an easy city to fly into. And a lot of us flew in a couple days early. Some of us flew in just the night before, but we all met up in Anchorage. And the trip started on a Monday. And so Monday we biked from one place in Anchorage to about halfway to another town called Girdwood. And then of course the van was there to pick us up. And so we hopped in the van after our about 20-mile bike ride. Again, there was flexibility how much you wanted to bike. We hopped in the van and we headed to the next town of Girdwood in the van. And the guides, of course, took all of our bikes and all of our stuff. And the stuff showed up at the hotel before we even did. So we ended up in Girdwood. Then we explored Girdwood that afternoon. The next day, we did another activity that was, I believe, our hiking day. See, now I'm already forgetting that. We did so much, I forget which day we did what. But then we did a hiking experience on day 2, and that was amazing. And then we spent one night in Girdwood, and then we headed on to the next destination again. And so every day we were doing activities, but also kind of moving along. And so we spent 2 nights in the following hotel in the next town, and then did activities there, and then moved on to another town called Homer and spent 2 nights in Homer and did activities there, different types of activities, biking, kayaking, hiking, and then ended up back in Anchorage. So we made kind of this circular loop, but we were able to see and do so much because we were never just traveling. There was never a day where we're like, all we're doing today is sitting in a car. There was always an activity in the morning, and then maybe a van ride to get from place to place, and then another activity or free time or whatever in the afternoon. And so we covered a lot of ground miles wise, and we did spend a lot of time in the van just because the distances are vast, but it never felt like we spent a whole day in the van because there was always things going on. And so the van was almost like downtime, and you have a private driver, and they gave us all these bags of snacks, and we just hung out and had a great time.
And I think it's important to notate that those little in-between moments in trips are sometimes some of the most special and precious moments too. So even though they're not like the highlight of the trip, you can still find a space to just kind of take a breather, wind down, and kind of reflect on everything else you've been doing. So I think it's important that even, in travel, it's inevitable that you're going to have those non-glamorous moments a lot of the time, but even that is part of the total experience.
Yeah, and it's so true. I mean, we laughed. One of the girls came up to me during the trip and was like, Janet, I have a complaint. My stomach hurts so bad. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on? She's like, I've been laughing so much that I literally have abdominal cramps. Because she's like, I think I've been working my core from laughing so much. We literally laughed nonstop. I mean, we had mishaps, we had fails, we had falls, we did a polar plunge. I mean, there were so many moments of just absurdity where here we are and it's pouring rain and we're freezing and we're trying to like kayak in, and all of us are a little bit awkward in the water, and we're just laughing and having the best time because we knew we were safe. We knew that there was always backup, and we knew that we were with this great group of people where there was no judgment. It doesn't matter if you hike slowly. It doesn't matter if you hike fast. It doesn't matter if you're the last biker or the first biker. I mean, that was what we laughed about the most. There was a gentleman on our trip, Scott, and if he watches this, he's going to probably be happy/mad that I'm talking about it, but we're biking, and this was at that point I was talking about earlier when half of the group decided they did not want to bike down this steep hill. And I'm a very competitive person. So when my husband said he is going to bike down this hill, I'm like, well, then I'm biking down this hill. Like, you're not going to do something I'm not doing. So off we go, this group of us, biking down this hill. And a few of the riders were like really, really good riders. So they had no problem. Off they went. And then it was hilly in the beginning, and then it was just like steep decline. And I'm taking my sweet time on this decline, and like my hand hurts because I had fallen, and it was like really slick, and I was super nervous, and I was way in the back. But behind me was this other guy, Scott, whose entire mission was like to beat someone on this trip. I'm joking, but kind of. So all of a sudden, Scott comes whizzing past me at like 35 miles an hour on the bike, screaming, on your left. And I was like, oh my God, really? Really? And so he like whizzed past, and he just like beeline down this mountain. The guide is all the way in the back yelling at him to slow down. The people at the bottom of the hill are waving for him to slow down. And it was like the happiest moment of his life. It was so funny. I mean, it was a little bit crazy. We were all a little bit nervous, but we laughed about that literally for the rest of the trip. I mean, all of us are like, on your left, here comes Scott, 35 miles an hour down this slick mountain. But those are the ones that make the trip so special. You know, at the beginning of the trip, when they told us it was going to be a polar plunge at the end, I think everybody was like, we're not doing a polar plunge. And it ended up that 10 out of 12 of us did this polar plunge. I mean, that's pretty incredible because it was really cold, but we just had such great energy and so much chemistry together. And everybody's like, well, if you're doing it, then I'm doing it. It was like this positive peer pressure. And I think everyone who went, I mean, we have these funniest text messages, and I've posted a bunch of pictures. You can see them. We're just laughing and smiling the whole time. Like, we're just cracking up because we just had such a good time together. And that's the chemistry that's kind of priceless.
Absolutely, for sure. So tell us a little bit about the accommodations on the trip.
So Backroads does things, they have different styles of travel. They have the casual, we were on a casual, comfort casual itinerary. We were in backcountry Alaska for much of the itinerary. There are not luxury properties really where we were. So we stayed at, they were comfortable, they were nice, nothing super, super fancy. We stayed at the Hotel Alyeska, which was probably the nicest property we stayed at, which was great. But really the views were phenomenal. The service was great. The rooms were clean, and we had access to these remote areas that you kind of needed to stay whatever, you know, in a place that's available. I like that Backroads also, this is a great point for, you know, a lot of these backcountry lodges and these destinations sell out, and sometimes they're sold out 1-2 years out. Backroads has contracts with these hotels and lodges in wilderness areas and remote areas and in national parks that I think are years-long contracts. And so they're able to get into places that the rest of us would not normally be able to get into because they are just booked out so far in advance. A lot of these places are pretty small. There's just not a lot of space there. And so you have these companies like Backroads that reserve a big portion of the hotel for their guests. And it allows you to have access to, you know, lodges that are the gateway to these beautiful places that are really hard to get to otherwise.
That's such a good point. You might be trying to, you know, put a group together and everything's sold out, but to the extent that Backroads has reservations and they anticipate so many private groups versus their non-private, I'll call them semi-private groups, right? Because they are smaller groups. They might have that ability. So, and that's something Janet and I check. We have the ability to create trips with different suppliers, some being like Backroads, but there's other suppliers, of course, that have groups as well. But it's always important before we assume that there's no availability that we look to our partners to determine if any of our partners are holding space under their contracts. I mean, I don't know if you'd be able to have put this group of 13 persons together if not for Backroads, given it was booked, spring for summer travel.
Yeah, we booked this, I believe, January, February, to have gotten 6 or 7 rooms that late in the year, even though it doesn't seem that late, 6 months out, most places would have probably been fully booked. And so then we would have compromised. And so you don't really want to compromise on a trip like this. You want to get the best possible experience because for most people, this is a once in a lifetime trip. And so, you know, when looking at, do I want to just book this on my own? I can just go to Alaska, rent a car, and do my own thing. You can, but it's not going to be the same experience. And the likelihood of you having access to a lot of these places is low. And we got to go into and have a behind the scenes tour of this amazing artist gallery / farmstead in Homer that we would have never even known about. And we got, to tour with the owners of that. And, we got to go on these trails that probably would have been, we hike a lot. John and I are huge hikers. We've hiked all over the world. And the hike that we did, we were at the very top and there's this 40-mile-an-hour winds and there's no path because it's snowed in. And we're literally like trying to find sort of a trail through the snow. Even the guides who had done this trail dozens of times are having a little bit of a difficulty trying to navigate it. And John said to me at the top, he's like, this is one hike I'm glad we had a guide on. You know, so you're able to do things that you really wouldn't be comfortable doing on your own because you know that there's someone else there who's experienced, who's knowledgeable, support staff, and if you get into any sort of trouble, there's someone there to help you. I mean, that's the peace of mind. For me, again, peace of mind is priceless.
And it's not just having a guide and accommodations, which in Alaska, accommodations sell out, but it's also all the equipment that's necessary. Jenna, why don't you elaborate on all the different equipment that Backroads provided you to accomplish all these different activities that were on your itinerary?
So when you travel to Alaska, you're not going to travel, most people are not going to travel with, 19 suitcases to bring all of the stuff that you need. Backroads provided us with hiking poles. They provided us with bikes. The bikes are incredible bikes that are custom made for Backroads. They're phenomenal. They're touring bikes. They're really, really high quality. They also had the option of having e-bikes available for people, and they check the brakes at every single stop. They tune up the bikes everywhere they go. The guys are bike experts, and so if anything happens to your bike, like literally as we're coming down the hill, we paused at the hill to take pictures, and while we're taking pictures, the guys are checking our brakes, checking our gears, checking our bikes to make sure that they're still working well. So they're bringing a lot of stuff with you. They also have these giant vans that are, taking you, and also the vans that have, the hitch on the back with all of the bikes. And so there's a lot of equipment and tons of behind the scenes. And the best part is they also bring snacks everywhere you go, and these big Yetis full of cooler Yetis with drinks. And so literally we finish a hike and there's like beers and wines and drinks and all sorts of stuff, and then these goodie bags that all of us have, and then we have lunches that are pre-made and set up for us. I mean, we had this girl Tiffany who was absolutely amazing, and we would get to our rest stop where after we had biked 20 miles, 30 miles, and Tiffany has the most beautiful picnic set up for us with these delicious gourmet salads that she had made, and cheese plates, and olive tapenade. I mean, really gourmet meals that are just set up for you in the wilderness that you couldn't bring all that stuff with you. It's because they have the ability to carry all that stuff, because there's 3 guides for just, there was only 12 of us, that we were able to have these things. And so logistically speaking, it just simplifies things, because all we really needed, we traveled with a carry-on. I mean, who can go to Alaska for, we were there for 8 days and do all these amazing activities and just bring a carry-on? I mean, seamless.
People might wonder, when you're on an adventure trip, what are some things that you really have to plan for in advance and to make sure that you have with you when you are traveling, even if it's simply a carry-on van? What are some things that are kind of a must-have when you travel on an adventurous itinerary?
Great question. You definitely need to have just a basic first aid kit. And it doesn't have to have a lot. It needs some, bacitracin, some Neosporin, some Band-Aids, and maybe some gauze strips, because accidents can happen. And then you need to have just a day pack with a water bottle and some snacks. I mean, water is so important. You have to make sure you're drinking plenty of water. You can get dehydrated even when it's really cold outside. I recommend bringing a little bit of ibuprofen. We always travel with some painkillers, because again, you fall, you twist your ankle, something happens, you're out in the wilderness, you want to be able to have that painkiller to kind of get you through. And then the biggest thing is, and this might sound cheesy, but it's really just a good attitude. Expect the unexpected, because it's going to happen. You're on an adventure trip. I mean, we saw so many wild animals. We saw eagles, we saw otters, we saw a baby bear in a tree. So the baby bear in the tree, and we hike, again, John and I hike a lot. We're used to carrying bear spray. Some of the people in our group had never carried bear spray. They weren't really familiar with it. But again, you have to have safety and common sense too. And so you have to understand that when you're out in the wilderness, you may have a wild animal encounter. And even though the baby bear in the tree was super cute, when there's a baby bear in a tree, that means there's a mama bear somewhere very, very nearby. And so you have to be alert, and you have to know how to, you have to be prepared and know what to do if you do have an unexpected encounter, with wildlife. And so we, just kind of be prepared to have the unexpected happen, and just gratitude. We had so much gratitude the whole time we were there, that You know, we survived this pandemic. All of us were vaccinated. We were just so happy to finally be able to travel like that, to be together with friends, to be in this beautiful, gorgeous scenery out in nature. And, you know, we kind of went with the flow. So good attitudes, a first aid kit, a big water bottle, a really good hiking backpack, and rain gear. Always carry rain gear because you never know when it could start raining, and it did. Like, we had beautiful sunny skies and all of a sudden it's pouring rain. So
talk about the temperatures a little bit, and also the lows versus highs, because I saw your pictures and just looking at the pictures, because sometimes it can be sunny but chilly. It wasn't clear to me how much layering you had to do throughout the day.
Lots of layers. So when you go on an adventure trip, obviously every trip is different. Alaska in particular, places like Norway, you know, Iceland, are places where you have to be prepared for the weather to change very quickly. So you might have a day where it's, especially when you're doing activities at elevation, where it's 75 and sunny, you know, at the bottom and the start of your hike, and then you get up to the top of the hike and it's in the 40s, and it was probably 40s with 40-mile-an-hour winds and hailing when we got to the top of our hike. So you have to be really prepared. So dressing in layers, having a really good quality, just jackets and rain, you know, good quality raincoat and rain pants. You can roll them up, stick them in your backpack, water, snacks, first aid kit. Those are all things that really can make or break your trip, because if you're not prepared and you're not dressed right, you know, it can be really hot, it can get really cold. So you want to make sure that you have appropriate layers so that you're comfortable, even if the elements are uncomfortable.
As far as your itinerary, Janet, I mean, is this an itinerary that's more for adults, or at what age would it be suitable for families traveling with children?
So you can do this itineraries with families. There are backroads, I think, allows kids to start at the age of 8. So you can start at as young as 8 years old, and they modify the trip if you are traveling with younger children. So this particular itinerary, I would say teenagers and up, because there are some long bike rides and hikes that, you know, younger kids just might not enjoy as much. But generally speaking, you can do an Alaska itinerary with, you know, school-age children, and they'd have a blast. So yeah, I mean, this was so fun, and I'm so glad we got to chat about it. And I'll post more pictures in the group because it was such an incredible experience. Please ask me questions. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys might have. Or, you know, if you want to reach out and just chat about the experience, I'm here. And I mean, I think that genuinely it was one of the best trips I've ever done.
And one thing I want to add, I have been doing some cruise bookings for Alaska for 2023, and a lot of my clients our clients have been looking at, well, can we incorporate a land itinerary afterwards? And some of the land itineraries for backroads line up quite nicely with the cruise end date. So you can always do a cruise and see Alaska by land and do a very similar backroads trip like Janet did to visit the national parks that are accessible by land that aren't as accessible by sea. So you can add a backroads pre or post cruise if you'd like. So that's something to think about. And that you can do any backroads where Backroads has itineraries, and they're around the world. They have amazing itineraries in Europe, Central America, Patagonia. So you can find Backroads, you know, we can find itineraries and we can align it with a cruise, or even doing pre and post where you do something more independently and rely on Backroads when you're looking to incorporate some of those adventurous activities that include having a guide to help, you know, for peace of mind and safety, as well as to provide the equipment for you. It is hard to schlep all this equipment on a vacation. So Janet, thanks for sharing your Backroads experience. I can't wait to sit down and learn more from you, as well as to see all the pictures from your trip.
Yes, and I might overpost, so don't judge me too much, but it was really amazing. Thanks, guys, and contact me. Happy to chat with any one of you.
Have a great day, everyone.